All right, so we are Facebooking live from my kitchen, which is super awesome. Apparently, teachers get this awesome experience in becoming YouTubers before their own children. So this is my first attempt at a YouTube video and a Facebook Live simultaneously. In practicing, because I will be delivering my curriculum this way for the next 3-4 months. And also because during this quarantine, I have given out probably about 35 starters now. And I have a lot of people out there that are looking for answers in how do I create a loaf of bread with a starter, with a sourdough starter. So basically the question is, how do I go from this thing to this thing? It's a process, I'm not going to lie. But once you do it once, you've got it, and you can do it indefinitely. If we're all quarantined and stuck at home for 3 months, you will always have bread. If you have flour, water, and a starter, you can have bread. So, basic necessities of baking sourdough. And I am not a bread expert. I've never made croissants. I love croissants. I've never made them. I would say I am an expert in this one recipe. So Tartine's country bread, no knead sourdough. This is the recipe that I'm giving with all of my starters. It is a 2-day process, and it's easy. There's no kneading of bread. You don't need a bread machine. You don't need a mixer. You have your 2 hands. You're good to go there. So what you do need is a starter. So if you know me, I'm going to do my best to get you a starter. I can send my husband on errands. He loves doing errands because I'm on lockdown with my kiddos. But if you live by me, then I have been putting starter with some information in my mailbox, lysoling the mailbox after you pick it up, and then hopefully connecting with everybody on how to get this whole process begun. So what do you need? You've got your starter. I suggest a mason jar, a quart one. A wide mouth is easiest, but you can still use these narrow mouths. You just need to have a little funnel. You need a Dutch oven. So a Dutch oven is a nice heavy cast iron camping equipment almost. You can get them at Walmart. You can find them for sure at Fleet Farm. The Lodge Company is a big company that makes these. They're not super expensive. If you do have an expensive Le Creuset, that is an enamel one, I believe those will work as well. I've never used my $200 Le Creuset. Sorry, Mom. But this guy, I think he's $30 and he works like a charm. So the Lodge, this one is a 10 quart. You can use an 8 quart. You can use, I believe, a 6 quart. But my loaves, I'll show you, my loaves get pretty big. So my loaves take up a good portion of that 10 quart. So I will use an 8 quart or a 10 quart, but 6 might be too small. Other things you must have, all-purpose flour. A smaller, much smaller amount of whole wheat flour. And then you need some salts. Salt you can do, I have a thing for salt. If you know me, you know I love all salt, all things salt. So, you can use any type of salt. I like to play with the flavors by changing up my salts. My favorite one is this smoked Kauai, so it's a Hawaiian smoked sea salt. I will use that one. Recently, my husband and I were in Turks and Caicos, and we bought some of their salt. I'm going to be using this one today in my tutorial because I've never used it before. Otherwise, standard go-to, pink Himalayan is great. Or if you've just got that blue Morton, that works just fine as well. So you've got your starter, you've got your flours, you've got your Dutch oven. The other thing that is really helpful is a kitchen scale. The kitchen scale is going to let you weigh everything down to the gram. The recipe that I use, everything is weighed in grams. And I'm sure there's a conversion out there that you could Google. I don't know what it is. I just use my kitchen scale for everything. Let's see here. Other things that you need, large mixing bowls. This size, a good large mixing bowl or two. And you need, okay, that's the essential tools. The non-essential tools, things that are nice to have. This, a bench knife. So the bench knife is basically just helping you to move your dough around and cut your dough in half. You can also use a regular knife. It's not a huge difference. Bannetons. So bannetons are, they're also called brote form in Europe, especially Germany. It's a reed basket made with circular reeds. You line it with flour, and that's what you let your dough rise in. Amazon has them for $8-9. I suggest you get two. I suggest you get two 10-inch rounds. They do come in oval. That's not my favorite. Two 10-inch rounds are going to be your best bet. When you're covering everything, you're going to want to have some disposable shower caps. So disposable shower caps, they come in packs of like 10 from Target or Walmart. These are basically just, I guess you could probably get away with using saran wrap, but I like these, especially in the summer. If I want it rising out on my porch, this makes sure that no bugs get in there. The other thing, they do sell bowl covers. The bowl covers, they come in a multi-pack, which is fine, but you wind up never using any of these. Like, I don't even know what you would use that for. It certainly doesn't fit to cover your brote form, and it doesn't really fit to cover your rising mixing bowl either. I guess maybe if you lost your mason jar lid, then you're good. But I usually wind up just throwing these ones away. So shower caps are the way to go there. So let's get to it. Those are the necessary materials that you must have to make some bread. I'm going to move some of this out of the way so you can see our process. So today, if you've already picked up your starter from me, it came in this like little cute little container. And here's how you take care of that guy. So first of all, give your starter a name. Your starter is alive. It needs to be fed. And it's just, this is a creature that's going to be living with you kind of like a pet for a while. So my starter, I'm going to show you my big guy that I've had for a while. This is my starter. His name is Castiel. I'm a bit of a supernatural geek. So when I start one, I just put the name and then what type it is. Now, starting a starter is a pain in the butt. I wouldn't suggest it for anybody. You can capture your own yeast in the wild just using flour and water. With great science experiment for your kids who are bored home alone right now, or not alone, but home with you. But otherwise, you can buy them from companies. King Arthur Flour sells them. The Perfect Loaf, Cultures for Health. My absolute favorite is Sourdough's International. And I have bought from him since 2008. And this starter is a Bahrain starter. It is a sourdough, but not to the effect of like a San Francisco sourdough. Typically, if it's really sour, they've added things like citric acid to it. But Sourdough's International, I think they have like 14 different strains of wild-caught yeast from different areas of the world, and you can purchase them. Some are better for rising rye flours. Some are better for wheat flours. This one is an Italian from Ischia Island. It's a sourdough culture that is really good for making pizza dough. I've never tried it, but it lives in my fridge until I'm ready to try that. So this guy is from Bahrain. I started him in November of 2018, and he lives in this giant container. Especially now when I'm giving away lots of starters, I need a lot of it. So your starter comes in this little cup. First thing you're going to do, transfer him out of that cup, give him some room, into a mason jar. Now you're going to feed him. And you're going to feed him the same amount of flour and water. So it's proportionate. If you feed him 1 cup of flour, you're going to feed him 1 cup of water. If you want to get pretty neurotic about it, because the weight of 1 cup of flour is not the same as 1 cup of water, you can weigh it out. I've done this so many times that I don't bother weighing this piece because I can just tell by look. I know my buddy Miss Kara, she can make pancakes without looking at the recipe. I think that's the way I am with the sourdough here. I do need a recipe for pancakes though. So the funnel is helpful if you have a regular mouth mason jar. You're going to feed them a cup of water or a cup of flour. And I'm going to get a cup of lukewarm water. Yeast is living. It doesn't like to be scalded. If you put your water too hot, if a baby bottle, if you couldn't feed a baby with it, don't give it to your yeast, because you will kill your yeast and then you're going to be SOL. So I've got my water, I've got my flour, and at the very bottom is the starter. I just use the back of my spoon and mix them together. So I've provided food and water for all those little yeast guys. They're going to start consuming those nutrients and it will become bubbly. It's going to rise towards the top. It might even come over the top. So I suggest that you just set the cap on lightly, or use a little one like this so that it has room to expand if it's going to. So this is a starter that's going to take about 6 to 10 hours to become active enough to bake with. This one is not ready. So I just fed him. He's good to go. This one here, I fed at 6 o'clock this morning. So if you want to zoom in on there, you can see that he's very bubbly. He is ready to start making bread. So you need to have your large mixing bowl, your scale, and your starter. That's ready. We're going to go ahead and, if you're following along on your recipe, step 4, make the dough. In a large bowl, combine 200 grams of leaven with 700 grams of warm water. So I need 700 grams of warm water. Once again, you do not want to scald your yeast, but you do want it to be warm to your touch. So anything that feels slightly warm to you is going to be about 98.6 degrees, 99 degrees. Some people use a thermometer. I just put my wrist in the water. If it's warmish, we're good. All right. So get your scale going. I'm going to point it towards you. So it says 0. I'm going to put my bowl on there. It's empty right now. I'm going to press the tare so that it clears it out. So now my empty bowl weighs 0 grams. I can go ahead and get my water in there. 700 grams of water is pretty close to about, I would say 3, maybe 4 cups. What do we got there? 500. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a smaller container, start pouring it in and watching the numbers go up. So you don't need to be neurotic about it. 704, good to go. Now I need to add 200 grams of, it says leaven. So that's my starter here. You can see that he's very poofy. He's gelatinous. So I'm going to watch that. I want it to say 904 or somewhere around there. So I'm going to just start scooping them in. Notice that it floats. If you pour your starter in there and it starts to sink, you've either waited too long, it ate all its food, and now it's not going to rise your bread, or you haven't waited long enough. It does need to float. That tells you it's strong enough to rise your bread loaves. So I'm looking for 904. All right, so we got about 902 plus whatever's stuck on the end here. So that's 200 grams of leaven. I'm going to stir it to disperse it all. So basically what's in here now is my starter and water. Now the question is, what do you do with your starter? This guy, I've used some of him, but there's a lot left in there. I'm still going to feed him because I have a lot of people who want starters right now. So I'm going to feed him while this is sitting here. I'm going to feed him a cup of water and a cup or a heaping cup of flour, just to make sure that I have enough starters for everybody who wants one. So here's that. And this. Now, if you were done baking for today, you would feed your starter, and your starter obviously lives in a mason jar, not a big square container like this. You will feed your starter at this point, and then if you're done baking for the week, you put him to rest in your refrigerator. So I'm just stirring here, making sure that this guy is about as thick as a pancake batter, a little bit thicker than that, more like waffle batter. I'm going to set that guy there. So I've added to him. If I was done baking for today, I would lightly cover him and put him back in the fridge. I will show you, I keep a backup starter in the fridge in case, God forbid, something happens to this one. The process of starting one from scratch is such a pain that you just always want to have a backup. So this is what the starter looks like when it's been dormant in the fridge for a few days. Not very bubbly at all. It creates a little liquid on top. That's completely normal. So this guy's going to live in the fridge until you're ready to bake again. And we'll talk about how to do that, how to bring him back to life at the end. Oops. All right, so we have added our 700 grams of warm water and our 200 grams of our starter. Now we add our flours. And I say flours because if you have whole wheat flour available, you're going to want to add a little bit of it. If you do not, it's okay. The total you want to add is 1,000 grams. So I'm back down here. I'm going to clear this guy out. So we said 0. And then I'm going to add 100 grams of whole wheat. There we go. And then 900 grams of flour. And I think that's going to take up this bag and maybe a little more of another bag. Yep. So I use unbleached, all-purpose. I believe bleached will work. It's just not ideal. I know some people use an organic flour. You can buy flours from local mills. There we go. All right. Woo. So we have 1,000 grams of flour on just sitting on top of our water. We're done with the scale for right now, so I'm going to move it. Stirring it from here with the spoon is a pain, and it's not worth it. So you're just going to wash your hands I know we all have our red chapped hands from washing our hands 75,000 times a day. Singing happy birthday twice, right? That's 20 seconds. Jinxie, shush. The dog wants to be let in. All right, so I've washed my hands. I am ready to mix. Now, all I do is I kind of start turning the bowl and I mix with one hand. Flour and water becomes like concrete when you're creating bread. So you're gonna want to scrape it off the sides, push it into the middle. It'll take maybe a minute of mixing with your hand to get where we want to be. So I'm just going around the bowl, scraping it off the sides, pushing it into the middle. And this dough is what is called ragged. It's very sticky. It's pretty high in hydration because in Minnesota, there is no hydration in the winter. All right, so it's pretty wet, but I don't think it's too wet. It's all mixed together. I've got a fair amount of it off the sides, but it sticks to your hands too. So do not put this just straight down into your sink. Get as much as you can off of your fingers because you don't want to lose that. That's part of your dough. Put it on top. And then if you can try to scrape it off your sides. The thing you don't want to do is you do not want to put it down your garbage disposal and then leave it there because it's a huge mess and your husband gets really mad. I've heard, never done it. So I'm gonna rinse this off real quick. And then this is enough dough to make 2 2-pound loaves. Just dry my hands quick. So we're kind of at the point where the Facebook Live video doesn't make a whole lot of sense because we need to wait. We're going to wait 20 to 40 minutes and the yeast is going to interact with the new flour and water and it is going to form gluten bonds. And those gluten bonds are going to turn this raggedy, really sticky dough into a smooth, strong glutened dough. And it needs to sit for 20 minutes. I would say in Minnesota in the summer, 20 minutes is good. It's pretty active. In Minnesota in the winter, 40 minutes is pretty good. So we're gonna stop the Facebook Live video. I will come back live in about 40 minutes. But please add some questions. Text me if you want a starter or Facebook message me and I will figure out a way to get you set up if you're local. If you're not, I don't know, put out a Facebook plea. Somebody please, or Nextdoor app. Somebody please give me a starter. Bakeries at this point generally they won't give you starter. But if you Google, you can also make your own starter. It just takes a while and it involves having a proofing box and keeping it at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time. So thanks for my first attempt, for attending my first attempt at a Facebook Live and a YouTube tutorial. Hopefully it'll get a little bit smoother from here.
Here we go. Hold on.
All right. So we have spent 40 minutes staring here, right here at this this lovely loaf here. So it's pretty warm in my kitchen today. I like my house hot. My husband doesn't, but I like to keep the fireplace on. So this is pretty warm. It still looks really ragged. What we are going to do now is add our 50 grams of warm water and 20 grams of salt. And like I said before, I like to use different types of salt. The salt that we're going to use today is one that my husband and I picked up in Turks and Caicos. So what I do is I grab my scale. I'm gonna tear out there we go. So it says 0. Then I need 50 grams of water, which is less than a quarter cup. So it's right around that. Close enough, 54. And then, actually my dough is pretty wet, so I'm going to go ahead and try to go maybe closer to, 48. Good. And then you're going to add 20 grams of your sea salt. Now, for this, I definitely recommend using a scale because the sea salt can really appear to be different amounts. So 1 tablespoon of one sea salt is going to be very different than a tablespoon of maybe a kosher salt or, a different type of salt. So this is 20 grams of our sea salt from Turks and Caicos. And I just kind of take my clean hands, mix it in there a little bit, and then I dump the whole thing into the bowl. Now I'm done with this guy. And then once again, washing hands before. All the mixing has to be done by hand for this recipe. It's really good if you wash your hands real thoroughly, and then you are going to be using just one hand to mix with. Leave that hand wet. So I'm washing my hands here. This hand is still dripping wet. That's important because it means that nothing is going to stick to it. And already I can feel that this is a much smoother dough than it was 40 minutes ago. You can kind of see it's going to become shiny. I'm just grabbing it, pushing it down into the middle. Grabbing the side, pushing it to the middle. And I keep turning. I keep pushing it down. I'm kind of wiping it off the sides. And you can see that it's forming a nice chunk of dough that is forming nice gluten bonds. It's holding together. It's becoming silky instead of raggedy. And that's really important. That's what you want. The salt kind of has it come apart a little bit. So you just keep pressing it. Keep turning it. And this is going to be how you're going to deal with this dough now for the next 2.5 to 3 hours. So from here on out, every half an hour, you are going to do a turn, what's called a turn. So instead of kneading this bread by hand, kind of pushing into it, we're using time and chemistry to allow it to basically knead itself. So we've added our salt and we have added our water. We've mixed it thoroughly together. Now that cover goes back on. It's going to sit for a half an hour. I use a timer on my phone. After that half an hour, you pull this off and it's going to have come together a little bit more, but you're going to do a full turn. And so this is what a full turn looks like. You take your hand, you scoop it, and you pull that side over. Turn it a little bit. Scoop, pull, turn, scoop, pull, turn, scoop, pull. Sometimes I do a fifth one and just flip the whole sucker over. Then cover it, put it in a warm environment, another half an hour. You are going to do that between 4 and 6 times. You know it's ready when it's billowed up about 20 to 30%. I'm no math major. I take a photo of mine right like at this point right now, picture of it. And then after I've done 4 to 6 turns, then I take another picture of it and I go, oh yeah, that is a lot bigger. Then you know that you're ready to go on to the next step. And we are going to upload videos. I did that step already, which is shaping the loaves. And so we're going to upload that video. It won't be a live one. Maybe I'll do a live one later in about 4 hours when this is ready to work with. But if you are really anxious to see what it looks like, we'll upload that video in a little bit here. Send me questions. If you want a starter, I will do my best to get it to you. I know we've got a couple people in lockdown that can't come get one. I'll do my best if you're not too far away to send my amazing husband to get it to you. Thank you. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, we are going to move on to step 8 of the country bread recipe. And we are going to transfer our dough to a work surface, and then we're going to dust the top with the flour. So my work surface is my granite countertop. I've sprayed it with just a Clorox bleach, and I'm going to wipe it down with just water on paper towels, just so that there's no bleach residue left. I wipe it down once or twice. This step does take a little bit of room, so I like to make sure I have enough room to be working with my dough. So I've wiped down the counter twice with just plain water on a paper towel. I'm going to dry it off quick. And then I'm going to be dumping out the entire bowl of dough that's been rising, and I've been turning it for the last 3.5 hours. And this is what it looks like. So for this step, I just use my all-purpose flour. Just do a general small sprinkling. And with clean hands now, I am going to scoop all of this dough into a ball onto my work surface. Once it's out of your bowl, I highly suggest that you get that into the sink, because this will become concrete on the outside and very hard to remove. All right, I'm going to put some dust or some flour, dust the top of it. And then this is going to make 2 loaves. So now I need to take my bench knife, or you can use a regular knife, and just eyeball it, and you're basically separating it into 2 different rounds. Now this dough is pretty sticky. It's Minnesota, it's winter, so I used extra water in there. But it does make it a little bit harder to work with. So we transferred it down, we cut it in half, and now we are going to be folding it. And this is the part that's really hard to understand unless you've seen it happen. So I'm going to show this step to you twice. Once with this piece of dough and once with this piece. So I'm going to dust the top with flour. I'm going to turn it over. And now most of the wet dough is on top. I'm imagining this like a square sheet of paper, even though it's not quite square. I'm going to take the bottom, gently pull it up and over. I'm going to take the top, gently pull it up and over. Take the side, up and over, and the other side, up and over, and flip it. So now I've got mostly floured on top. I'm going to add a little more flour, and I'm going to just flour my hands a little bit. So this is the shaping part. Basically, you're tucking and rolling your dough. Tucking, rolling it towards you. Tucking, rolling it towards you. It's making the dough taut on the top. You'll see there's little air bubbles that'll start to form. The tighter you make your dough, I'm just pushing it across the surface, and it's kind of becoming tighter and tighter into a round shape here. Now that's the first time I've done this. It's now going to rest for 20 minutes, and I'll do it one more time. We're going to move on to this guy here. Dust the top with a little flour. Now I'm going to flip him over. He's real sticky. So now I'm going to fold side and side, top and bottom. So I'm just picking it up. And if you were going to be adding any ingredients like bacon, onions, anything that you wanted to incorporate into it, I'll just put some everything bagel blend in there to show you how that works. You just put it in now and you just incorporate it that way. Pull it around in the top here. Now you can add rosemary, you can add chives, you can add smoked cheddar, chopped cooked bacon, onions. All right, so now it's really sticky still, so I'm gonna dust the top again. Make sure my hands have some flour on there. Kind of cupping it and pushing it away, pulling it towards me. It's really just the friction between the bottom countertop and the dough that's pulling it tight across the top. It's not really a special movement or anything. Just kind of a tuck and a pull, or tuck and a push and a turn. You just keep it in it, turn, turn, turn. All right, now you can cover these with a kitchen towel. I prefer to reuse my mixing bowls, and you really just want to cover them so nothing touches them. Nothing like just sticks to the top. So we're gonna wait 20 minutes and then continue the video. All right, so now we have left the dough to rest for about 30 minutes. Now the next step is to prepare our bannetons. Or if you don't have bannetons, you just need a mixing bowl. If you're using a mixing bowl, you are going to line it with a kitchen towel and flour that towel really, really well. I use bannetons. It's just a reed basket. And every time you just add more flour in there, you don't ever kind of release the flour or try to get the flour out of there. It just lives in there once you've got it in there. So the directions say to mix whole wheat flour and rice flour. I generally don't bother doing that. I just take my rice flour or even all-purpose flour and I just pour it in. The rice flour they use because it's just helpful. It's non-stick. It's a really, really finely ground flour. So it kind of attaches to the sides of your bannetons. These you can get for 10 bucks on Amazon. Otherwise, a bowl with a thin kitchen towel with this flour on it works just fine. So I'm just gently, with clean hands, pushing in the flour into the grooves on the banneton. That's so it doesn't stick to the wood reed on the outside. So it's got a pretty good coating there. Now I'm going to do the other one the same exact way. I'm just scooping it, pressing it into the sides. You don't want a pile of flour in the middle like this. You would never leave all that in there. You just kind of dump it off to the side. You can use it when you're working with your rounds and your bread dough in a second here. The bread will not, if you have a 10-inch banneton, both of these are 10-inch bannetons, it's not going to rise up to the top. It won't fill that whole amount. So if you've got some edges showing like these guys up here, that's okay. The other thing I always do, I either put a everything bagel seasoning, maybe some flake salt, mostly, almost always, sesame seeds are really great to have right on the top. So although it's on the bottom of your banneton, it's actually going to become the top of your bread. So those are set up now. So that was step 9 and 10. We're going to uncover our rounds of dough. Move some of these things so you can see what's happening. The other thing that you are going to need is a cover for your banneton. I like disposable shower caps because you get 10 of them and it's like $2. If you can find the stretch to fit bowl covers, those are nice as well. The thing about those is you get 3 small, 3 medium, 3 large, and 1 casserole. You're only going to use the large ones. These little ones are pretty useless. So these I wind up throwing half of them away, or they just collect. These are all the exact right size we want. So I'm getting 2 of those ready because I'm going to cover these at the end. So now these have rested for 30 minutes and they've spread out a little bit. What we are going to do is we're going to take our bench knife or your regular knife. You're just going to scoop it and flip it. And now we're going to fold the exact same way we did before. So pulling from the bottom to the top, pulling from the top to the bottom, side to side, and side to side. Okay, so it's like a little package. I'm gonna flip my package over here, and then I'm gonna powder the top with some flour, and I'm going to do the push-pull again. Now, it's grabbing on to the bottom and becoming taut on the top. There's some little bubbles you'll see. It's almost like a skin on top of your bread. And then you'll notice that, like right here, it sometimes starts tearing a little bit. That's when you've gone a little bit too far. You want to be a little bit gentler with it. So this guy's going to sit now. He's ready to go into the banneton in about 2 seconds here. I'm going to move some of this. So we're going to shape this guy as well. And this is the one I put some of those the bagel topping in. So I'm going to do that again. Grab my everything bagel blend from the Spice House. And just put a fair amount in there. So if you're adding bacon or cheeses or scallions or shallots or onions, you're going to want to do that one more time here. Then I'm going to fold them together. So bottom to top, top to bottom, side to side, side to side. Flip them over. And now I'm going to flour the top. And just do a quick, gentle shaping. If you have too much flour on there, it won't adhere or stick to the table, and then it seems like kind of you're getting nowhere. So you just kind of need to wipe the flour away from the surface you're using so that it has a nice surface to grab onto. Now, I know this is getting taut because my bubbles are appearing. And I'm going to show you that in a second here. The other thing that kind of starts happening is you can start to see your ingredients kind of pop up. So you can see there's some bubbles, some air bubbles in there. And don't pop them, just leave them there perfectly fine the way they are. Now it's time to transfer your rounds into your bannetons or your lined mixing bowl. And you just pick up the whole thing, flip it in there. So this is called the seam side. And that seam side will become the bottom of your bread. You're going to want to cover that guy. If you let this guy sit for about 5 minutes, that seam will close up pretty well. I'm just not going to worry too much about it because these guys are going to go into the fridge now to rise. So that was step 9, 10, and 11. So I put these guys in the fridge now for 12 to 24 hours to rise. And that really allows the flavor to develop. So these guys are going in the fridge, and then we'll add another video about baking tomorrow.